And greetings. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I'm pleased to report last night I broadcasted for the first time on my new computer, and I'm going to get another one of these. So I don't have all my studio set up here. I'm going to, you've probably seen I have a different background now. And so glory and honor to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's what this channel is about. It says the kingdom of heaven is like hidden treasure. It's like treasure hidden in the field, whom a merchant sold all he has and bought the field. So the Lord ordains things such that unless one has like a road to Damascus experience, like the Apostle Paul, where God just appears to someone, God invites people to search for him and to find evidence for his existence. So last night I was talking about evolutionary theory, and most of the time I actually didn't get to prosecute the debate. It was mostly between the other two versus Cindi, and that gave her a chance to kind of experience debate and feel what it's like. She's not normally in these sort of settings, and I hope that that's a lot to ask to put her on a very big debate stage. I'm incredibly indebted to her because she substituted for my primary partner, which was to be Rebecca Davis. I guess that was somewhat well known that Rebecca was really the primary one, but Rebecca wisely, I think, had to bail out. She's been getting, as you know, she had a ministry toward atheists, and I think they are just they're treating her badly. And I encouraged, I insisted that she not be in the debate. I had done some things that did upset her, so I take responsibility for that. I had a good thing going, and I blew it. But some of the actions I did kind of really infuriated the atheist community, and because she was associated with me, since we have done shows together, they really started bullying her. And why didn't they go after me? For one, they don't have any means to get a hold of me. If they start giving me garbage in the emails, I'll just block them. I'll send them a nasty note first and then block them. And if they start showing up on my channel in the side chat and the comments, I'll send them a nasty note and then dismiss them from the channel. Rebecca has a heart of gold, and she felt her mission was to reach out to and be a witness to these people on YouTube, and she was generous. And it's, I felt they were just taking way too much of her time and just distracting her, and nothing ever, no one ever really changed their minds or learned anything. It's definitely on their side. Now, so Cindi bailed me out of a really tough situation, because even though I have insisted that I want one-on-one debates, to get Aron Ra, it had to be a 2 versus 2. And I had been called in as an alternate to do the debate against King Crocoduck that David McQueen, professor at my undergrad alma mater, is doing tomorrow. David McQueen versus King Crocoduck. And I almost had a one-on-one debate. I actually have to say, short debates, like, say 1 or 2 hours, and when one party can't even complete a sentence without being interrupted, it's not very amenable to actually getting across the truth. And what can happen is sometimes when you're making a really good argument, the other party will just disrupt and your train of thought is gone. And this is the way, if I could have negotiated a format that would have been more favorable toward a good discussion, I probably would not have gotten Aron Ra. He likes to do business a certain way, and I respect him. I do want to say nothing personal against him. In fact, I felt that even though he was sharply in opposition to the viewpoint that Cindi and I articulated. He's very gracious to Cindi. I mean, he would interrupt and they would argue a little bit. That was fine. That's what debates are for. But I could tell he was deeply compassionate toward her about all that she's been through. And that was the one thing I think quietly, the undertone of the entire panel was we were actually rooting for Cindi, that she just recover from all the garbage she's been suffering through. Christians have been saying horrible things about her, and it was a chance for me to kind of elevate her to the debate stage and say, hey, she should not be treated as a pariah. She should be welcomed as someone valuable in the creationist community. And some creationists have been saying horrible things about her, and I'm glad to have been partnered with her. Now, Schnoil points out it was a good debate. Cindi sometimes fell into Aron's trap, like sometimes. There was a trap for 20 minutes. I'm just like, okay, Cindi, and I turned my timer on. And I finally said, can I get 2 minutes in? I've been waiting 20 minutes to say something. And I just let everyone have it. Because I was hoping Cindi would recognize the trap. So the trap is, it's what they call a lawyer badgering a witness, just asking questions, just bludgeoning them with questions like, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? How do you explain this? How do you explain that? And it's all you have to do. You don't really have to think very much. And just like, Cindi, there are ways to deflect that. It's like, well, you just asked me a question. Now I'm going to ask you a question. How do you explain this? How does evolutionary explain that? Okay, so it's very easy to just kind of just sit there like you're in the witness chair, and she let Aron and Dr. Chris just interrogate her. So yes, she fell into the trap. I warned her that's going to happen. And I told her, I said, if they start attacking you like that with questions, that means they feel you're the weakest of the two partners. They did not, I said, that's a sign they did not want to engage me. And I don't think it really registered. That's why they were conversing with her the most, is because they had the most to gain in that exchange. So, okay, Deviant Outcast said, I get that's a hard question to answer. Oh, never mind, Sal's on it. I don't know what that meant. So I was hoping she would catch on, and I kept trying to say, Cindi, may I get a word in? And I was getting a little frustrated, or I was trying to signal and say, and I don't know. I couldn't get through. And I was like, Cindi, you're letting them, I told her so many times, you do not let the opposition define the terms of the debate. When they start asking you questions like that, I mean, because it is a discussion, out of courtesy, you try to respond to one question, but you don't let them go on a tirade and continue, because they end up making it seem that you spent all this time and you didn't defend your points. You didn't make it. Well, you didn't defend your points because you didn't make any points. They're making their points subtly. And so these are, oh my. Crams here says there's no being polite with a pig like Aron Ra. Okay. So I'm just like, okay, Cindi, just let them tangle with me more. I'm just like, there's a reason they want to spend most of the debate talking to my partner, not to me. And that happened in the last 4 other debates, and people were just saying, Sal, wish you got a better partner. And it's like, yeah, Rebecca would have known exactly. She would have recognized the move. But there is still something to be gained from all this. There's still value in this, and I need to get to my point here. This is I was talking about reconnaissance and force. And there are a variety of ways of also stating this. In the military, sometimes you just got to go out there and get shot at, and then you know what the enemy's position is. You're trying to get shot at so you know where they are and you can fire back. And so some of these debates, sometimes you don't want to go out there too weak and then you just get run over. So a reconnaissance force is you can go out there. The idea is to just kind of probe where their position is. You have enough to defend yourself, and it could be a full-blown engagement and you start shooting each other. So some of the guys there in the military understand this, and because I was in the aerospace and defense industry and I love military science, and here in Northern Virginia, it's very hard to run away from being involved with military people. And it's the military industrial complex here. The term Beltway bandit is common in the United States because I live right near the Capitol Beltway, the highway that surrounds DC. And they call them Beltway bandits because you have all these aerospace and defense contractors and lobbyists all around here just trying to get government funding. So the idea of reconnaissance in force, go out there, just say something, see how they're going to respond. Then you go back and you do debrief and say, okay, I know how they're, if I do this, this is what they're going to say. And you have data on them. You can either try to engage them right there, or you go back and kind of think this through. And then if you have another chance to engage someone else, because I doubt Aron Ra will ever want to debate me again, especially one-on-one. At least if I am confronted with the same arguments, I'll be better equipped to respond to them, because sometimes you have to think about what they're actually saying and it doesn't come to you immediately at the moment. So you look kind of stuck and confused and just like, well, yeah, I know this is wrong. But like a mathematical proof, if I were sometimes correcting someone's proof in math, it's like, you don't figure it out in like 1 minute. So for example, when I was a math student, even putting forward a good proof, I remember I worked on one proof in linear algebra. It took me 6 hours. And I was laughing when someone told me, he said, yeah, I worked 6 hours on that proof. And it's like, is that what I am in for when I take this class? And then I took the class and I was like, that was 6 hour proof, because it had so many components to it. And sometimes you don't, they'll say, sure, this is true. And you're just like, let me look through my textbook to see all the theorems that have already been proven. And maybe I'll take one from here or there. And really understanding what someone says and trying to conceive of a concise way of refuting it. It's rare that you can do it in one single debate. And I found that, I'll give a good example. I was in a discussion, not a debate, with Jackson Wheat. He put forward, I said, okay, what about membrane-bound organelles in eukaryotes? And he gave some baloney answer, like, oh, the way it evolved is stuff just leaks in and out. If you've seen the center of the cell, a eukaryotic cell, the nucleus, it's surrounded by a membrane. And I said, okay, how does stuff get in and out if you don't have all these little ports, what we call nuclear pore complexes, little tunnels that are designed to only let certain things in and out? And he said, well, stuff can leak in and out. And I was just like, huh? And if people are watching the debate, they'll say, he stumped Sal. And I'm like, I only got stumped because I was thinking, how do I refute such a stupid argument? Honestly, it wasn't like I didn't know that the guy was wrong. And I didn't know I was also, okay, I'll have this confused look in my face like I'm bewildered. It's like, well, I was really actually I was thinking of a way to politely say, but also firmly say, Jackson, you're wrong. I was so tempted to say, Bud, you need to go study cellular biology. Your cellular biology sucks. And because it was such a bad answer. And I said, I don't, I want to be a civil and not condescending guy. It was gracious of me to be on Jackson's channel. And I didn't want to just open up with just such a mean insult and say, your cell biology sucks. So does your biophysics. It does, but I had to be a lot nicer than that. And I said, well, I don't think that'll work. I could have been just really pounced on him. Now, what I had done after the debate over the course of the next year, not full time, obviously, I began looking at the question of that membrane bound organelle and how stuff could go in and out. And I learned about like the RNAs and other polypeptides are too big to be just leaking through. You need active pushing and moving it through. I'm like, that's one. And you just don't let stuff diffuse in and out. The reason for membrane-bound organelles is to concentrate the amount of elements in a locality, so you can get certain chemical reactions to behave a certain way. All right, that MSU clown boy is right on top of this, Sal. So it seems maybe there will be a face-off, maybe not. Oh boy, yeah. So there is a lot of drama there. I had a good nerd discussion with Dr. Chris, and we probably would have put the audience to sleep if it were just me and him. We had that exchange where we were talking. He said, well, what about why are all the differences in the organisms? I said, well, each organism has different needs. I referred to post-translational modifications and hydropathic optimization. And I knew, I was like, okay, this is really getting nerdy. And we talked about model organisms. We could have done more of that and just had like just kind of cordial discussion, that sort of discussion academically. It's like, okay, if we were having this, and I'll just say, okay, in a scholarly way where we're not trying to impress the audience or anything and have all the theater, the way to resolve this is like, okay, Dr. Chris, so that's your position. Can I get back to you in a few days? Let me think on it. I think I have a response to what you have to say. And, let me get back to you. And so like with me and Jackson Wheat, that might have been, if we weren't under pressure to kind of make theater, that would be the way to resolve things in a scholarly fashion. I need to point out, do you have debates like this about mathematics? I mean, do you have people like, oh, today someone's going to debate whether this math theorem is true or not? It's like, no, you don't get that drama. Just think about it. Why do you have, when the truth is so obvious, you don't debate it? You can talk about it and why it's right. Debate happens when the truth is not obvious. When the truth is not so blatantly obvious. And that's when two sides will start to compete. So in a scholarly discussion, if you're really committed to truth, you're going to go back and forth. So some of these theorems in mathematics took hundreds of years before they were finally formulated. So many times we would accept it, but we didn't have the proof till hundreds of years later. Good example is the fundamental theorem of calculus. We had been doing the relationship of integrals versus the antiderivative, and it was accepted for a long time, but the rigor did not come in till like 100 or so, or 100 or 200 years later. And it was actually somewhat contentious. So Alois and greetings. Thank you for visiting this channel. Deviant points out the rhetorician wins the day. And who's the better performer under pressure? Yes. Good example is Kent Hovind. Can make stuff up on the fly. His conscience doesn't bother him whatsoever that he's making stuff up. And I know that. I have good examples. The worst one was when he was trying to explain when Cindi Lincoln had was threatened and said the assailant had a gun in his pocket. and Kent Hovind comes out and says, no, that was his private parts. I was like, you have no shame, Kent. You just make something up. And if you deliver it with authority and sincerity, people will just buy it, you know? Whereas me, I'm just like, kind of like, let me think about that. Let me think about how to say it right. Let me diagnose this and let me figure out how to say it politely. And then, of course, I end up, people think I lost the debate or I didn't know what to say. And it's like, well, neither did Kent, but he's willing to just make stuff up on the fly and not care that he's ever going to be called on it. Yes, Lois, I'm sorry. Yes, it was disgusting. There are many Kent Hovind fans that I was just saying that's an example of something that's not true, guys, and you're eating this up. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm just like, do you not see on something like this, if he's that willing to not tell the truth, that you should be very, very, very much more skeptical of anything else that he says, and they don't get it. So that's just the first example that came to my mind. And so yes, the rhetoricians win the day. That's why debates, like modern day debate, are about theater, not really about arriving at the truth. So on a technical point, what did I learn? One, debates happen because the truth is uncertain in many people's minds. What the truth is not clear. That's why debates happen. You don't get debates like this about mathematics. Yes, exactly so. Debates happen because it's not clear to each person what is the truth. So we pray their eyes are open. They worship man instead of the Son of Man. And so that was one. The next is Aron was, by the way, before just to back up a little bit, that opening statement, Cindi and I had to argue 6-7 hours over the content of that first 9-minute opening, because the way we structured it, I had to fight with her for every point, and I say, okay, what you're going to say, both of us have to agree on, and where we disagree, just say that at some point in the debate. But we have to agree on this. And oh my goodness, it was so hard. So there are times I had to say, okay, I know you want to go at the taxonomic level. We have to argue this at the molecular level. And this whole thing with the bent pencil, I was trying to explain the bent pencil to her. I had to spend 3 or 4 hours kind of teaching her the basics of kind of molecular level biology. I said, did you know the central dogma? This is DNA. This is the alphabet. So she referred in the diagram to the genetic code. I mean, she referred to the diagram I put up of the genetic code. She said, what's the genetic code? And I said, did you know all species share that genetic code? She said, what's that? So I said, okay, the way I could be a blessing to her in this debate is I said, okay, I don't want you to say anything. I'm going to teach you some of my arguments, but if you disagree and it violates your conscience, I don't want you to say, okay? One reason I wanted her to do the opening statement is it gave her a chance to see a different kind of creationist argument. And in the process of just doing that 9 minutes, there's 9 hours of us just fighting each other and saying, Cindi, that's the way you're trying to prosecute this is not up to standard to go up against a PhD like Dr. Chris Thompson, who's a professor of biology. And when I mean going up against him, meaning could you debate him in front of his students and make a strong case? This isn't about you debating him in front of people that are just like the church crowd, okay? It's a different ball game when you have to be debating a professor of that caliber and you're presuming you're doing it, at least in your mind, before his students. And so the way we structured the argument was toward the college level. And I said, okay. She said, but no one, there are a lot of kids that won't understand what you're saying. I said, I don't care. We're dealing with a college professor. We have a chance to formulate an argument that we can present to him, and we'll see if he's able to shoot it down. And he took some good shots at it. I credit him that. Oh, and take care. God bless you. Yes. So what's the purpose of this debate? Is it to persuade anyone? For myself, my investment was I got to teach Cindi better creationist arguments. I got to teach her molecular and cell biology. So she'd been all these years, she'd been at Dinosaur Adventureland teaching other kids, and she didn't know cellular and molecular biology. I said, Cindi, this is a good time to learn, because where the argument will be at the cellular and molecular level. If you keep arguing at the morphological level, okay, so morphological means like an adult human being has 100 trillion cells. And if you're describing the human being in whole, that's one level of organization. But if you're going to the individual cells of that human being, and there are 100 trillion of them, roughly, it's at that level of argument that creationists have the best case. And I was trying to take her from like talking about, the skeletal structure and all the features, all the organs. So, one level of organization is talking about the whole organism, is, the skeletal system, all the major organs, etc. It's easier if you argue at the protein level and at the cellular level. And I'm more convinced of that now, because one thing she did exceptionally well is toward the end, she kept saying, Aron, look at that protein diagram. And I don't know if you noticed, but I noticed Aron could not resolve that problem. I said, look at that protein. She said it several times, and I'm proud of her for doing that. Look at that protein diagram. You can't solve it. And then we didn't have enough time for me to teach Cindi about eukaryotic evolution, because that's just brutally complex. Dr. Chris knew I was putting that on the table. The diagrams just floated over Aron Ra's head, I'm afraid. And he started saying, well, that's not, evolution doesn't include eukaryotes because that's not descent with modification or something like that. I thought that's kind of clever. And I could have said, well, that just shows it doesn't explain the complexity. It fails to account for a major feature of life. We'd be dead if we wouldn't exist if there was not the eukaryotic architecture. Where'd that come from? Are you just going to keep redefining evolution when it's very problematic for you so that you don't have to deal with it? That's just kind of hilarious. And I could have been really mean to Aron, and I wanted to, I did respect how nice he was. I could tell he cared. I could tell he felt remorse that Cindi had gone through so much with her ex. And I respected him for that. And I could tell he was trying to be, reasonably cordial, but I could have said, Aron, okay, I did pull a little rank on him. I said, have you published in population genetics? I said, you invoked it. And I just kind of subtly letting him know, you're not going to kind of pull that garbage that you just pulled on Cindi, where you said you don't have no clue about evolution. I said, I published in population genetics. By the way, I could have really rubbed it in. My co-authors are very much more senior scientists than anyone there that night, including Alla Hosder, who is a professional population geneticist, won a award in Sweden in mathematics. He won a medal. He won an award. A national award in mathematics on his work in population genetics. It's like, Aron, you're not going to pull that garbage on me. All right. You can try to tell Cindi she doesn't know a thing about evolution. You're not going to pull that on me. I just had to kind of put him in his place. I said, you're not going to say that. You're not going to start doing these subtle ad hominems, and you're not going to, if you try that on me, you're going to get a little piece of your own medicine. And I kind of put him down a little bit, but I didn't want to go over the top. But I could have totally told him, I said, Aron, you obviously haven't studied. You can't have morphological changes unless you have cellular changes. And it didn't occur to me to say that until now. You can't have morphological changes until you have cellular changes. The morphological changes that you may see may or may not indicate, may or may not tell you whether you can have these sort of cellular changes without a miracle. And I could have told him, I said, how does that morphology, how does that change in what you're claiming, like all this speciation stuff, how stuff speciate, and his funny definition of macroevolution, which is unfortunately, I think, standard. But, evolution has come up with just funny ways of describing things that just don't make sense. I was reluctant to accept his definitions, but I should have said, okay, let's go through every protein I have in my inventory. And it's not a lot, but it would have taken 10 hours. I say, okay, why don't we walk through the insertion of the nuclear localization signals here? Why don't you tell me, how does that explain the probability of this, being within expectation? And I could have just hammered him on the math. And I said, you have no clue. You haven't the foggiest idea of what I'm talking about. And that's the problem. And he's saying, you're dodging it. I said, it's irrelevant. You know what I should have said, and now I regret it. You don't have morphological changes without cellular changes. And just because you have morphological changes that you may have observed, you don't know the degree of cellular change that was involved. You cannot extrapolate that you had a big morphological change there, therefore there was a big cellular change. Wrong. I can give you an example. Very tragic, actually. Our genome has 3.3 gigabases, pieces of information of DNA, actually technically nucleotides, which for a variety of reasons, it's actually equates to 6.6 gigabits of information. Flipping of just 2 bits, one nucleotide out of 3 billion will cause something called achondroplastic dwarfism, where the person just becomes just like really small, just not grow. One change. So you can't say that this, that necessarily proves you can make a lot of changes to the DNA just because you saw a big morphological change. And I was trying to point out, I was able to point out when, if they were willing to explore it, when I put on the table the chromatin stuff, I'm just going to say, do you realize how many simultaneous changes need to occur in the DNA to make this feasible? Have you worked out the calculations from first principles? Do you even know what I'm describing? Do you even understand the system that I'm describing? And I could have just said, if I used the same condescending language, I'm saying, it's obvious to me, Aron, you don't have a clue about what I'm talking about. Maybe you should learn. Maybe you need to come to my 6 hour. He was inviting Cindi to have a 6 hour conversation, which was very gracious of him. I knew he was doing it because he cared about her and wanted to kind of set her mind right. My intentions would not have been quite so charitable. I would have been just trying to take a hammer and say, Aron, you're not as smart as you think you are. You're a lot more clueless. It would not have been a nice exchange. Okay. So I recognize Aron really genuinely was trying to persuade Cindi and, get her to reject Jesus, to reject creationism, and she would be therefore a much better human being in the process. Well, I sense that, and I totally respect him for that. But, I could have been just really mean to him and said, Aron, you have no clue about this. You have no clue why it's relevant. You're totally clueless. You can't even figure out that, what you're doing doesn't make sense, et cetera, et cetera. And, all your stuff about taxonomical stuff, just doesn't cut it. Who is the Swedish mathematician? Let me show you who he is. Good question. So I'm looking here at my other screen. Ola. Show you. And I'm going to show it here. So Ola Gerten Henrik Hoster. Says, my name is Ola Hoster. I'm a professor of mathematical statistics at Stockholm University. I live in Sollentuna, north of Stockholm, and I have two daughters, Evelina and Linnea. I wonder if Linnea is related to the name Linnaeus. And let's see. Oh, awards. Members of the Swedish team at the Mathematics Olympiad in Paris, 1983. Recipient of the Hallberg donation in Uppsala University, 1987. Young Swedish Statistician of the Year, elected by the Swedish Statistical Association, 1989. And the Gustavsson Prize in Mathematics 2009. That's the national prize in mathematics. So he teaches coalescence theory and population genetics, stochastic processes, population genetics and gene mapping in English. Okay, so what's the significance of this? Ola Hoster. There is a paper here, and you could see the names: William Baster, Salvador Cordova, Ola Hoster, and John Sanford. And that's why I was not going to let, if Aaron wanted to play that game with me and start accusing me of not having a clue, I'm just like, but you're going to be really sorry. And I think I just kind of warned him gently. It's like, don't try to do that to me. You're going to regret it. Oh, wow. Congratulations. By the way, I want to thank the graduate students like Ben Rex and Schnoil and Mr. Jetty 89. You guys are real inspiration. And to be honest, when I see you guys on my nerd torture sessions, you guys scare me. I'm just like, you really like some of this stuff, and I'm suffering through it, and just like, yeah, and you're wanting more. I'm just like, goodness, that's kind of scary, guys. You're an inspiration because it makes me value the academics, and it's an inspiration to see Christians wanting to be excellent in their fields. I'd like to salute Ben Rex 777. Congratulations on entering graduate school, studying photonics. He gets to build really cool lasers, and I have fascination with that. Mr. Jetty works on a particle accelerator, and Schnoil is a computer scientist. So we got a smart crowd here. We got an intellectual crowd. So evidence and reasons for the Christian faith, we're trying to kind of like dumb down this channel a little bit so it's being more accessible to other people. So, just because I had the debate yesterday, I'm just being a little bit more technical because I noticed about 12 new people came to the channel, probably just interested because I was talking about evolution. So I might have more on this just for a little bit, for a few weeks. Okay, here it is. I'll build a controller for laser welding of copper. That's really cool. And someone said, yep, Linnea has the same etymology as Carlos Monille, Linnaeus. So, by the way, Ola Hoster is a evangelical Christian, and so it wouldn't surprise me if he named her Linnea after Linnaeus. This paper, Ola Hoster, award-winning mathematician in the field of population genetics. John Sanford is the famous geneticist. I mentioned him last night. Billions of people, starving billions have been fed through his invention, the gene gun. Retired Cornell research professor, atheist turned creationist. Praise God. Atheist turned Christian creationist. And William Basner, professor emeritus of mathematics, and the dumb kid on the block is Salvador Cordova. The dumb kid on the block in that publication is Salvador Cordova. I was the dumb kid on the block, okay? And I just wanted to say, Aron, I got to rub shoulders with these guys as my co-authors. I don't think you'd stand a chance if we really had a serious argument over population genetics. Our paper demonstrated population genetics does not come anywhere near solving the problem of organs of extreme perfection and complication. In other words, Darwin failed to show that his theory accounts for the complexity of something like the eye. And in a short debate like that, where I could hardly say 30 seconds without Aron or someone else interrupting, it's just like, this is just not going to work, because some of this stuff is complex enough. And he was, we talked about last night some of the stuff that he said I was mischaracterizing. Like, no, I wrote a paper that specifically tried to show that this is actually the way it should be characterized. It got through, it got through peer review. It's a reference work that's on university shelves now. Secular universities have our work in it. It's mildly critical of evolution. The way we got away with it is we quoted evolutionists themselves in context, used their formulas, used the math, showed the conclusions. We didn't say anything that isn't in the mainstream as far as the elites, the actual scientists. It disagrees with popular level stuff, and sadly, even some of the popular level stuff that creeps into textbooks that's wrong. It's terrible. Some of these textbook authors are just, their standards are not as good as you might think when it comes to origins. They let a lot slide that's very speculative in trying to show that that is fact. But when it comes to the actual source documents, we reference those. That there's no reason they should assail what we had to say. Our purpose was to make a reference work that surveyed existing literature, and we did that. There's no reason it should be retracted. But anyway, he has spoken at the temple of a Satanist. I always knew he wasn't an atheist. He's always been a God hater. He hates the God he knows exists. Okay, perhaps a debate solely on the cellular level would Aron et al. Accept? No, I doubt it. I doubt it. So, let's see. So that was, I'd say, if I had to summarize the kind of the debrief, is that I would like to learn a little more about Aron's, really not Aron's, but really the funny evolutionary definitions that, I wanted to say, use any definition you want. It's not going to prove your point. You're just going to it's like shuffling chairs on the Titanic. It's not going to stop the boat from sinking. So just use whatever you want. But, to humor the dialogue, it's like, okay, so your definition of macroevolution is you make a species, that's macroevolution. How does it prove the origin of proteins? And Cindi was really sharp at keep pointing to that diagram. Now I'm really glad I made that diagram. It took me, I had to actually work 3 months to arrive eventually at that diagram, not because the diagram itself, but I had to find these proteins, study them, learn more about them, how difficult they are to evolve, what their structure and function is, and all the details surrounding it. And they are very complex, more complex than meets the eye, but they also had the feature that visually you could actually see, like the way when I started to color the bars, you could see how they are, you could see how they could not have a common ancestor. If I picked other proteins, it wouldn't have been so visually easy to see it. But I specifically picked those because you could actually see the problem. Otherwise, you'd have to use computers. You couldn't see it with your own eyes, and you have to be relying on quotes. But it's different when you can have something that visually compelling. And I don't know if you all noticed, but they didn't object to the diagram and say it was wrong. I don't know if you noticed that. That was actually pretty important that it was pretty important that they didn't contest that as an empirical fact. They really could have gotten that. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. It was pretty good that they didn't contest what I said. They could have assailed it and said, no, you're wrong, Sal. They didn't. They actually subtly gave away something I've been affirming. There's no universal common ancestor of the major protein families. That's a big deal. I don't think they underemphasize it, but that orchard will suggest, boy, there had to be miracles for each of these classes of proteins. So I got that out of the way. Dr. Chris and I had a little argument about model organisms. I need to tie a loose end. He said, well, it's not that good a model organism. And I could have pointed out, and he showed some experiments on some of the organisms he's working on. Why are you working on all these other creatures, like I think it was like either a salamander or something? Do you really care that much about the nervous system of a salamander? Or you're trying to, do you think your research would be funded unless we felt it would help us understand human biology? He said, oh, no, it's not really that good. And I should have said, looking in retrospect, well, what would be the best model organism? Wouldn't it be another human? But he himself said that's an ethical concern if you have to dissect humans to be able to understand human biology, especially a live one, at various stages of development, from fetus to adult. So you want to learn about an adult. Are you going to just like grab them off the street and start cutting them up so you can understand how their body parts work? So I could have said, okay, you're going to have the problem then if you have a model organism that's not exactly like a human. You should expect that it's not going to give you everything. The only way you're going to get everything is if you have a human. And he rightly said there's an ethical concern. And one person in the comments said, there you go, Dr. Chris, assuming he's an atheist, how do you have any ethics about this? Because that's an ethical question right now, that we are using aborted fetuses and their body parts to do medical research. And thank you for the feedback, Lois. The diagram stunned them because it was stunning. Yes, the protein diagram. The protein diagram. And I'm glad Cindi kept using what I gave her, and she could see it. It just takes a little thought, because they were thinking, we got this. Sal was just saying, Sal and Cindi had given away the house by talking about the nested hierarchy. And then we showed that diagram. It's like, oh, you got to explain that. I never got around because the opening used up so much time to talk about optical illusions like the bent pencil, that I didn't have time to really elaborate on eukaryotic components like chromatin, the membrane-bound organelles, nuclear pore complex, translocation, et cetera, et cetera. But those would have also been pretty stunning if we had the time. Yes, so request was about this. Okay, what was the stunning diagram? So let me just walk through where we were. In fact, I'll just start it from click slideshow. From beginning. Okay, so we open with what's wrong with evolutionary biology. That was written by an evolutionary biologist. We took a swipe at the whole discipline, and Cindi and I could have just kept emphasizing just how bad this is. We compared it to, this is for you, Ben Rex, Maxwell's equations. There'd be no electrical engineering without this. And we described we can understand biology without reference to evolution. And then I pointed out that superficially you might think there is evolution because we have creatures like chimpanzees that look so similar to us. And pointed out that a single ugly fact can destroy a beautiful hypothesis. The pencil is not bent, and we can look at biology if we want to persuade ourselves that it's evolved, we can, but we look on the facts, you can realize it's not. Just like we look at the facts and realize the pencil isn't bent. And I talked about a few things. So the reason they believe in evolution is you can arrange organisms in this hierarchy, and it suggests a family tree. But I said, and we'll even say that we share 99% of the creatures share the same genetic code, which that's the genetic code right there. A wheel diagram of it. But I said the problem is first the origin of life. There's no evolution. There wouldn't be evolution, therefore no evolutionary theory if we didn't have the miracle of the first life. But then the next problem is the proteins. So first of all, here are some major protein representatives of major protein families. Going from left to right, zinc finger protein, homohexameric helicase, homotetrameric potassium ion channel, the homodimeric topoisomerase 2, an insulin receptor, and a collagen, that's actually collagen heterotrimer. Boy, had to struggle to list those. And this is the diagram Lois was referring to. So, so here's the zinc finger. That's an approximation of the geometry. And this is the collagen. So on the left is a zinc finger, on the right is a collagen. Unfortunately, the way I laid this out, I should have reversed it in this diagram. On the right on the left is the collagen, on the right is the zinc finger. And so we have the spelling of the proteins here in terms of the amino acids for the collagen paralog, and the spelling of the zinc finger 136 in humans. These are both human proteins. And what I did is I just highlighted certain features. Like here, all I did was highlight every third G. G for glycine. And it's just a striking pattern. This defines what collagen is. Here, you don't have that pattern. You do have like the C's here, the cysteines in red, and then the histidines in purple. And you can see it makes a non-random pattern. Visually, you can actually see it if you use color coding. Some of these other ones that are not the exact same letter, they're in the same group. the same family of amino acids. That's why when you color them in terms of also like not just the exact amino acid, but the family that it is a member of, you get even further patterns. And there's no way that you can have a common ancestral protein for these two. And, you know, sometimes you can tell that, and I'm learning to realize this, when they don't want to challenge a point, you've just blown them away. And sometimes I just move on to the next topic. What we could keep doing is hammering the same topic because they're silent for a reason. And I'm learning this now. When they do that, you just have to keep throwing it in their face and say, you need to comment on this. This is a problem, isn't it? And we should have done that more last night. It's like, oh, you're not commenting on this because you don't know how to handle it. Why don't I just keep throwing it in your face? And we should have done that. So that was the diagram. So thanks, Lois, for giving me an opportunity to talk about that. So now finally, before I close, there's this thing about Jay Bundy. And I got some feedback this morning and say, Sal, I was so upset with you because you're egging him on and you're helping promote him. The guy's crazy. I was like, really? And he said, yeah. In fact, you know, concern was raised for my personal safety. The guy's just kind of like unhinged. Do some of you know who he is? Let me see. So there was, I'm hearing funny sounds out there. Sorry. There was some reference to where he said, I need a hug or something. That was a joke, an inside joke. And I'll show you what the inside joke is. The inside joke was, I did a video said, there's an evolutionary biologist who needs a hug. And let me show you, see if I could show.
Doesn't it seem like your search engine?
Okay. So the title of this, the evolutionary biologist who needed a hug.
50 times more earwax than cotton swabs. And
so first I have to get through the commercials and I'll show you the video. Why don't I include the audio? I want you to see this, just so you can understand who Jay Bundy is. I think you might be entertained. So let me get this all set up. Stop screen. I'm going to share my screen. And I'll just let you, you can enjoy this for your viewing pleasure. It's only like 3 minutes long. And so there were a lot of questions last night from someone called Jay Bundy. All right. So.
Sal. Shame, shame, shame on you, my friend, for misrepresenting science so egregiously. Folks, I have been planning tonight's impromptu expose on Sal for your viewing pleasure. But as I am the fastest rising star in the entire counter-apologetics community, I am grossly in sync, in lockstep, so to speak, with the will of the people in this entire industry. And so it just so happened that my broadcast tonight overlaps with Sal's live debate against T-Jump. How about them apples? But folks, let's get a couple of things clear. I have not been invited to debate Sal tonight. On top of that, I am far more entertaining than T-Jump. Amen. Hallelujah.
Victory, 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 victory.
And I will not stop until I have victory, 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 victory. And since Sal is too scared to challenge the United States champion to a one-on-one encounter himself, consider the champion challenging you right here, right now. I will not stand for being dodged. If you were gonna talk shit about evolutionary biology on the internet, you need to bring that motherfucking nonsense to an evolutionary biologist. But no, you'd rather debate T-Jump's chair. And then you use that nonsense to counter-apologize, to counter-program the most important counter-apologetics show all week and weekend long. That, of course, being late-night counter-apologetics. Sal, I will not stand for this. Consider yourself my next victim. And if you want to do something about it, I dare you to try. Because you are going to have to kill me before you can beat me for this United States championship. And in the meantime, I will whoop your ass every single time all over the goddamn internet. I am calling you out. Let's see you do something about it. It's time to start the goddamn show. The champ is here, and I am on fire.
What can I say? And look who showed up. The man himself. So, well, thank you for visiting here.
No matter how old you are, no matter what genes you are born with.
So, I will, don't worry, folks. Sal is in absolutely no danger yet. I wouldn't want anything to happen to him before he gets in the ring with me. The champ is always ready to wrestle. See you soon. Kisses. So last night, several times, there's several super chats where someone makes a donation and people were pleading for Sal versus Jay Bundy. I think I've been advised that maybe for my personal safety, it's not a good idea. I think Jay's a little unhinged. He might need some psychiatric help. So sorry, guy. You know, I think you need to obsess over someone else. But there was history between us indirectly. And so let me highlight what that is, just so people, oh yeah. And thank you, Fran Marie. So let me try to give a little bit of history.
With this breakthrough science reveals how this weird...
So, Robert. Mind matters. So just to introduce the characters here. There was a show recently this year on artificial intelligence just to introduce the lab. So there is a laboratory called the Evolutionary Informatics Lab, and also there's a project by the Discovery Institute that deals with artificial intelligence. And it's called Mind Matters News. And you could see there were 4 shows that involved me. And it was, you could see it says Sal Cordova. And this is where, actually, let me play a little bit of this. I want you to hear a little bit.
Welcome to Mind Matters News. I'm your competitive host, Robert J. Marks. We're talking today to Sal Cordova, who made bucks card counting in Vegas. He's sharing his insight into the world of gambling, and it's just been a fascinating trip, but we want to talk about a little bit more. Have you ever taken advantage of your skills in betting with other people?
Yes, team play.
Oh, team play. But this is a team play at a casino.
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to tell you one of the great examples. I want to tell you a way to be honest and always win in a lottery.
Actually, I forgot that part, how to be honest and always win the lottery. You can go there. Why don't I just drop the link in the chat? There were actually 4 shows. The entire month of 1 month in the summer were just me and Dr. Marks talking. We recorded it in his office down there at Baylor when I visited this past May. So Robert Marks and Sal. Robert Marks is, so I'm just introducing who all these are, and it relates to Pocket Locker 86 and all this kind of the history. Robert Marks is a distinguished professor of electrical and computer engineering. He had done work in evolutionary algorithms. He's an ID proponent. I would probably be kind of in the old Earth creationist camp. He's not a young Earth creationist. I don't know if he even characterizes himself as an old Earth creationist, but he definitely, it's a very interesting story. I think I could share this, part of his Christian testimony. He either became a Christian or then started seriously pursuing the Christian faith and living it, because he wasn't a very good academic. He was, probably not hanging around the best crowds, but then when he got to college, the Lord worked on his heart. He became a very dedicated Christian, and then his academic career flourished. And he succeeded so much, he became a professor at various universities and then promoted to distinguished professor. I mean, that's, the title says it all, that he's a distinguished professor. He gets certain rights and privileges to have attained being called a distinguished professor by a university. There was a, let me see, he was in the movie Expelled. So the movie Expelled about academics who were getting persecuted because of their sympathy toward intelligent design. So there was a laboratory in 2007 that was being formed called the Evolutionary Informatics Lab. The existence of the lab got him into trouble, and the Baylor University shut it down. And then the president of the university got in so much trouble over that, plus some other things. They fired him, thank God, John Lilly. And Ken Starr, who actually went to my church, McLean Bible, went down to Texas and then became the new president of the university, and then made a public apology to Dr. Marks over the Evolutionary Informatics Lab. So some of you from like 14 years ago, there was a big movie, motion picture movie called Expelled. It featured people like Carolyn Crocker, who was at George Mason University. And she and I were in the prestigious scientific journal Nature 2005. When that article came out, 3 weeks later, she was fired from the university. It was very sad. She ended up in the movie. And then Robert Marks was in the movie because they shut down his lab. Now, the funny thing is, I was invited to be a graduate student at the Evolution Informatics Lab. And they shut that lab down. I ended up going to Johns Hopkins instead of Baylor. It worked out well because I was still working in the area. I didn't have to quit my job, and I could take care of my mom, my widowed mother, while I went to school. Lived in Virginia, commuted all the way to Baltimore, Maryland to take classes. And actually just south of Baltimore, there at the Applied Physics Lab, which is it's still up in Maryland. It was a long commute. And so, hang on, let me extinguish this phone call. I'm sorry about that. I better call. It's a friend of mine, and I need to find out what's going on. I'm about to finish up because we're talking about Jay Bundy here and my indirect history with him. So, the lab shut down. I ended up at Johns Hopkins instead. Didn't go to Baylor, but I maintained a distant relationship with Dr. Marks. We'd seen each other, and the project I was going to be working on, and I got offered a nice sum of money plus a graduate degree, was to deconstruct these evolutionary algorithms that claim to show that Darwinism actually works in biology. And one of those things was a project called Avida, which, and God bless you, Lois, for remembering this thing about Dr. Marks. Yeah, there's lots of stuff about this. Let me see if I could, Robert Marks. So there is Dr. Mark, way back in 2007, this is 15 years ago. I'm just going to show the article here. Dr. Marks was thanking me when I saw him this past summer for standing up for him on the internet blogs and defending him. So there's this problem at Baylor University at the Evolutionary Informatics Lab. Let's see if they even mention it. Yeah, there it is, the Evolutionary Informatics Lab. Now that may sound kind of funny that it's actually it is somewhat a laboratory whose results are actually critical of biological evolution, but it's an evolutionary informatics lab because we have things called evolutionary algorithms that are used professionally. And so what we can learn about evolutionary algorithms is you need a designer to make an evolutionary algorithm work. So Bill Dembski is really kind of big on like intelligent design, but maybe there's an intelligently designed evolutionary process. Of course, that is definitely not traditional young earth creationism, where you have a miraculous process we can't understand, and we're not expected to ever really understand it in detail. Whereas evolutionary informatics is the idea that God maybe designed a biosphere and natural selection so that it can guide a creature to evolve, but you still need intelligent design. I may be mischaracterizing this a little bit, in my simplification. So the Evolutionary Informatics Lab really is just seeing what kind of programming do you have to do to be able to make an evolutionary algorithm that, for example, can solve, well, the classic one's the traveling salesman problem. Like if a salesman has to travel to so many cities, what's the most efficient route so he's not going back and forth? Can he go from city to city? It's actually a very difficult problem to solve if you have a lot of points and you don't have a computer, but you can use what they call a genetic algorithm to come up with the best or a good enough solution to the problem of the traveling salesman. So because we have these genetic algorithms, we're just like, well, evolution works that way in biology. And some people try to extend that idea and say this is proof of evolution. And one of those groups was Avida. Someone named Adami, I think Chris Adami, Ofria Pennock and Lenski. The last two names are important, Pennock and Lenski. So you have Bill Dembski, Robert Marks, and then later on, Winston Ewart, Eric Holloway. I was supposed to be in that lab, or at least I was invited. And there were others affiliated with the lab, like George Montañez, who went on to Carnegie Mellon, and Jorge Fernandez. So there was a group there. Peripherally, there's Michael Behe, who was not an official member of the lab, but he had some important things to say. Very important in his book, Darwin Defaults. So just kind of imagine that lab. On the other side, there's Adami, Ofria, Lenski, and Pennock. And guess who is Jay Bundy's advisor? It was Pennock, Robert Pennock. There's also a little backstory of Pennock. One of my professors was Richard Dawkins' drinking pal at Oxford. And then I saw that professor's name in Pennock's book on intelligent design. I was like, oh. Anyway, so that's the drama. So our group was very critical. One of their missions was to deconstruct the Avida project, to also criticize Lenski. And so this has been a 15-year conflict. Some of the stuff developed by the Evolution Informatics Lab, the mathematics are just horrendously I'm sorry, I got distracted. Sal, you featured my, okay. So anyway, let me just try to finish my story. I lost my train of thought. So there's been a long history between Jay Bundy, his group versus mine. It's basically two rival labs trying to discredit each other. So that's kind of the heritage. And it just so happened, I don't know how, it was only through Robert Beatty, like this month, that he said, hey, do you know what this guy's saying about you? It's like, I don't even know who he is. And then I found out who he is. And I'm like, oh, well, that's neat. So basically, when he wanted to challenge me to debate, I actually didn't want to debate him. I mean, I think he needs to go to a psychiatric institution first. I'm sorry to be mean. I'm trying to be helpful here, Jay. I think you got some issues, buddy. I think you have some issues there. You're kind of creepy, guy. But I did want to have a chance to talk to Pennock, and I wanted to have someone that could fill me in on Avida, because I remember when I actually worked on the project briefly. I had independently worked on the Avida project without knowing before I went to Dr. Marks. And I put in something that got Evan Dorn, Adami's PhD student, to try to have a discussion with me, and I should have been really mean to him. But being the nice guy, it's like I'm not going to be any more confrontational than I need to be. I perceived he was just giving me BS so he could get through his PhD program. And Evan Dorn, I hope you appreciate the fact I didn't call you on it. I tried to make sure you got through your PhD program. I hope you'll return the favor, because the stuff you're saying was utter BS. And there you go. I just wrote my dissertation on Avida, and Pennock doesn't this debate with creationists. I guess you're stuck with me. Okay, Jay Bundy. This could be a deal with the devil here, because I'll tell you just for you. This is directed at you, Jay Bundy. There was an earlier version of Avida way back in 2004. Richard B. Hopp was saying, Sal, you don't understand evolution. And I said, evolution goes the wrong way. He said, no, look, I got Avida working this. So I was talking about the experiment of Spiegelman's experiment. And I said, evolution goes the wrong way, because in Spiegelman's experiment, the quote unquote test genome was shrinking. fitness was improving, but you were losing. You went from, actually, just so I don't totally mess this up, Spiegelman's monster. Spiegelman's monster. So let me, okay. So now I'm getting really nerdy, and I need to call my dear friend, because he just called me. So let's, Spiegelman's monster. I'm sorry to laugh. You just said, also my bipolar is treated. I take meds every day and I see my psych regularly. Thanks for your concern. I'm doing very well regarding my mental health. Okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't. Okay, hey, all right. There's a saying by Seneca, there's no great genius without a touch of insanity. Okay, if you're in that category, I might let it slide. All right, just be a little careful with that, buddy. So let's get back to Spiegelman's monster and Avida. Spiegelman's monster is the name given to an RNA chain of only 218 nucleotides that is able to be reproduced by the RNA replication enzyme, RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, or also called RNA replicase. It's named after its creator, Saul Spiegelman, at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, who first described it in 1965. Spiegelman introduced RNA from a simple bacteriophage Q beta into a solution which contained Q beta's RNA replicase, some free nucleotides, and some salts. In this environment, the RNA started to be replicated. After a while, Spiegelman took some RNA and moved it to another tube with fresh solution. The process was repeated. Shorter RNA chains were able to be replicated faster, so the RNA became shorter and shorter as selection favored speed. After 74 generations, the original strand with 4,500 nucleotide bases ended up as a dwarf genome with only 2,800 bases. The short RNA sequence replicated very quickly in these unnatural circumstances. All right, so I still remember this. This was 18 years ago, but it's crystallized into my mind. It's important to the later work I did with Dr. Sanford, and I hope to do with Dr. Marks, because just for the sake of full disclosure, Jay Bundy, I want to have communication with you because I want to destroy your work. That's why. Don't think that I'm doing this because I'm trying to be nice. So what happened with this? You had a genome of 4,500. Natural selection whittled it from 4,500 to 218. That's a factor of about, say, 20. And I said, Richard Hopp, Dr. Richard Hopp, big evolutionary proponent on the internet, evolution goes the wrong way. And he said, no, Sal, look at Avida. And I laughed. I said, you're gonna use a computer simulation to try to refute an experimental result? I mean, I could make a video game that violates all the known laws of physics, and it'll still at least computationally model this silly universe. Like, you know, we have video games like that. The fact that it does, you know, the fact that the Avida model doesn't model what's happening in experimental results is kind of disturbing. And so what did I do? There's an old version of Avida that's not there anymore. I took it there, and they had this, and I, you know, Hop said, okay, you need to study this, you know, I'm not going to talk to you. You need to learn. Just really condescending. And Dr. Hop's there in hell now. He just, I mean, he tries to be cordial and, you know, he tried to be very civil to me, but every now and then he just said stuff that's condescending. It's like, sir, you're burning in hell now. I don't, you know, sorry, sir, but you're condescending and you're wrong. you've been disproven by Linsky's own experiments in 2017 at the long-term evolution experiment stuff. Numerous observations have falsified it, and then it shows Avida was wrong. But it didn't stop Richard Hopp in 2004 from saying, you need to learn this. So I humored him, and I learned how to run Avida, a version that doesn't last anymore. You won't find it anywhere, in fact, I think in the archives. And I played a little trick on him. I said, they had this radiation parameter where you can model the mutation rate. You can affect the mutation rate by exposing the little digital creature, make-believe creature. It's not a real physical biological organism. It's some concoction of man. This basically short machine code. And Ben Rex would probably understand this. So would Schnoil, who understand computer architecture. This is at the machine language level, and they're trying to evolve something like a XNOR or one of these slightly more than trivial logic gates. And so I cranked up this radiation parameter. It simulate just terrible mutation. I cranked it up all to 50. I just some absurd number. I said, this is like taking like your cat and putting it in a microwave, cranking it up all the way to high, running the microwave oven for 3 days, and then telling the cat afterward to reproduce. And all these digital organisms kept reproducing. I said, something's wrong here. I said, Evan Dorn, don't you see? This is a laughable simulation that you could do this, and the creature doesn't die. I could probably put that parameter up to infinity. Don't you see that it's not Royal Truman, who's a great chemist at BASF. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, hopefully he's retired now. And he's also a computational scientist. He rightly pointed out the way Avida replicates its genome, the replication system, the major parts of it are not subject to all the mutation. Only that little segmented part, and that's what I proved. And I told Evan Dorn, I said, this is just kind of, I didn't want to tell him, in harsh words, but technically it's just a farce, guys, that I could do this. Later versions probably don't have that same problem, but I'm like, and I had that result. And then because I had mentioned it in passing in various forums that Bill Dembski watched, he referred me 3 years later to be a student to become a student of Robert Marx, to work on the Avida project to deconstruct it. And so that was my work. I handed that off to him, and I still have the old emails, and we're just kind of, there's Dr. Marx, me, Bill Dembski, some others, including a physicist. And we were all just kind of laughing at this, and we're saying, well, how do we deconstruct this? They're not going to be very eager to explain how this system works. They can give us the code, but we really need to explain what they're trying to do. They had all this impenetrable language in their Nature publication. And Winston Ewart tried to work on it. He wrote something on Avida and also like Tierra and all these others. And I felt that they tried to attack it with pure mathematics. And I had objected to that. I said, there's a little easier thing. The computer scientists for the computer science work, maybe we could make stuff about information theory and what sort of things you can construct, in terms of evolutionary algorithms, the limits of the solutions you can find, et cetera, et cetera. So from a pure computer science problem-solving perspective, the question of Avida, Tierra, et cetera, has academic interest. And a lot of these academic interests, you think, does it have any practical application? We find that many times some of the stuff we explore is not immediately practical, but then we find out it's not immediately practical, but then sometimes someone finds something of use for it. There's some theorems in mathematics. It's just like I was actually surprised, like Bertrand Russell's, the Russell paradox has something to do important in understanding computer security, etc. So these kind of strange questions, it's like, okay, Winston, Bill Dembski, and Robert Marks, you want to write papers on this, that's fine. What I was interested in is showing that it's irrelevant and misleading to use Avida to argue biological evolution proceeds by Darwinian mechanisms. And in one of the papers I published through the Blythe Institute, I specifically cited Lenski using Avida to teach how evolution works. I don't know how long ago that was, but he better stop doing that because that's misleading. His own experiments do not show that that's how natural selection works. And so I wanted to learn a little bit more about Avida so I could start to incorporate it and modify it to parallel Lenski's experiments. And so this is going to be really embarrassing for Lenski that he wrote this Avida, advertised it, and that the way it works is not reflected even in his own physical experiments, citing this paper here. And I'll see it. I'll show it to you. This is the paper in question. Proceedings, National Academy of Science. Maybe one of the better papers, better titled papers here. Mutator genomes decay despite sustained fitness gains. This is the golden phrase right there. This is like Spiegelman's monster. This is the problem. As Darwinian fitness improves, the genomes go downhill. And last night I was pointing out, I said, look, I showed a paper that said mutation and selection are responsible for the decrease in intelligence in the human population over time. Evolutionists have been saying mutation and selection build up complexity. At least as far as human intelligence, that's not true. Lenski's experiment on bacteria, that's not true. I could show you pangenomic profiles of E. coli and other bacterial species, that's not true. One is going to be very hard pressed to see that mutation and selection actually work in the construction of anything but trivial changes. Anything require multiple simultaneous changes, such as a major protein family that has numerous interacting partners, forget it. And it's false advertising to say that this can happen in gradual incremental steps, because yes, it can if you have selection pressure to do it, but where would the selection, why should we expect it there? No one has actually calculated the probability that such selection pressures will exist out in the wild. Winston Ewart, Robert Marks, and Bill Dembski tried to formulate some mathematical things saying, depending on these conditions, that, we don't expect this to hold. I don't think we need quite the 180 pages to prove that. I think there's a shorter route, and I had a conversation with Robert Marks about that. If we go just with the geometric arguments that I wish I had time to discuss yesterday, I could easily show that the likelihood of the selection pressure existing is probably worse than just random mutation. Maybe that's the way I would go. It basically would be a simpler statement of Dembski's displacement theorem. So there you go, Pocket Locker. And Pocket Locker, how can I get a hold of you, Pocket Locker? Maybe we can have a academic discussion. I don't want to debate, sir. I feel I owe it to you in full disclosure what's at stake in it for me. If you want that, I feel I owe it to you to be full disclosure that I have no friendly intention about this. This is for all the beans, for all the marbles on this debate. Now, I sense that you think you're going to win this, so I hope I can trust you. That when I ask you questions about Avida, it's going to be represented correctly. I intend to work with people to write papers that'll be very critical of Lenski's work, very critical of the Avida project as far as biology, not as far as its relevance to anything specifically in computer science that does, the improvement of writing algorithms and all. That's not my domain. It is the relevancy of Avida being applied to biological evolution. So if you can, oh my, all right, Pocket Locker. There might be a way you could post in the comment section what your email is. If you have a curriculum vitae with your publications, I'm willing to read it. And I'm really sorry to say this, but I don't think your team, the LTE Avida project, is. I think they're either self-delusional or they're hiding important data points because their project is not right. Lenski's own experiments showed that it is a bad model for how evolution actually works. And it's, is this about trying to maintain grants, trying to maintain reputations and keep paying your mortgage? I'm sorry to have to put it in those terms. When you have those pressures, you tend to rationalize, even if you're not willfully lying. There's a lot of pressure to, let's say, not be, to maybe give the benefit of the doubt to a bad argument, shall we say? I'd like to know a little bit more about that Avida project. I have some questions about even Adami's original work, because we are reading through that paper the first time. It's like, what are you guys talking about? You're using just all these kind of idiosyncratic, these specialized terms that almost seem made up on the fly, that no one in the industry seemed to use at the time. And if it's and if it happened to be just that it's obscure, they should have had the courtesy to try to explain it, because certainly we had computer science guys working on this, looking at it and kind of just rolling their eyes like I was, like, what the heck are you talking about? So, and so it's like, is this deliberate obfuscation? And then the paper gets a free pass in the journal Nature because it's pro-evolution, not because of its merits, not because of its scientific merits. So, I may call up my friend Eric Holloway, who worked at the Evolution Informatics Lab. He and I are affiliated with the Blythe Institute. I published at the Blythe Institute. We might write an anti-weasel or anti-Avida program. So, Jay, thank you for showing up. If you want to post in the comments section for your contact information, I would be interested. I hope. Thank you for being open about your. Thank you for being open about your mental health issues, and that you're taking your meds and you're seeing a psychiatrist. I feel a little happier to hear about that, because a mind is a terrible thing to waste, and I'm sorry to just laugh. I'm dealing with a psycho. Oh my goodness. but I want to deconstruct Avida. So that's the basis. I don't think a debate would be very okay. Thank you, Robert. I started to laugh, Jay. I'm dealing with a psycho. But just to explain the dynamics of last night when I was referring to Jay Bundy, it's like, come on. I wanted to explain what's going on. You know, trying to refute evolution at the academic level is a lot tougher than what you see in debates. This is a 15-year battle between two rival labs over supremacy of who's right. And you got some very fine minds, especially Robert Marx. And then peripherally, there's Michael Behe, who wrote Darwin Devolves. On the side, very much farther out on the side, is the genetic entropy crowd, which is I'm associated with, you know, John Sanford, Ola Hoscher, Bill Basner, myself. And then somewhere in between's Michael Behe, and then the Informatics Lab. There was a publication, and you'll see all the big names here. BINP. This is kind of in intelligent design circles. This is a famous publication. And you'll see all the affiliated names. And out of this grew a lot of new researchers whose names that it's better you don't know who they are. They are secular researchers who are moving up the ladder, and they're ID proponents, but we're trying to keep their identities private. So you can see the name here, Robert Marx, and then I worked for John Sanford. I almost worked for William Dembski and Robert Marx at the EIL, and I worked for John Sanford. I would like to continue. I'd like to reestablish a relationship with Robert Marx and William Dembski on a working level, because some of my more recent peer-reviewed papers, academic secular, touch on the work that they had been doing. And going back to this list of people, we have also, I don't really know, Bruce Gordon was at the Discovery Institute. I really don't know him personally. Michael Behe and I have met. He knows, I'm acquainted with him. He knows who I am. So that was I didn't expect to go for an hour and 45 minutes. Robert, God bless you, sir. Cease and desist, alphadynamics21@gmail.com. Thank you very much, Robert. God bless you all in the side chat. I know this is just boring academic stuff. That's who I am. I don't necessarily enjoy the academics myself, but I need to do it to move forward with, you know, professionally. But this is done for the glory and honor of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Academics are boring, but it is a cross for us to bear. We try to be all things to all men so that some may be saved, and our cross to bear is to be an academic and suffer with the rest of the people there. It gives us an opportunity to reach out. That's the mission field that I feel God has appointed me to, is to be around academics, to witness to them and also encourage them. Academics like Ben Rex here and Schnoil and Mr. Jetty 89, and there's other academics that watch this channel, and I'm grateful for them. 6exotrig is another one. So let me now close the stream with this. Take care and God bless you.